Hello guys and welcome to today's Los Blancos podcast. Today is a special one. It's a Luka Modrić tribute podcast and it's been coming. We've known it for a couple, months at this point. He is now officially an AC Milan football player. No longer a Real Madrid football player for the first time in over 10 years, 11 years in fact. Yeah, it hurts. We've grown used to losing these guys every year now. Last year was Toni Kroos. We've lost Benzema, we lost Ronaldo, we lost Varane, we've lost Ramos, we've lost so many guys over the years. And this is one that really hurts, I think, because for me personally, I've not really known a Real Madrid without Luka Modrić in it. And so the fact is that I'm really sad to see Luka Modrić go, because he is everything to this club. He leaves as one of the greatest players for this club. For me, he's probably the greatest midfielder in the history of this club. I think he's greater than Zizou, than Toni Kroos. I think he's the greatest midfielder that's played for this club. And some of the achievements that he's achieved was just incredible at this club. He absolutely raised the level of this team so much. And he's had different eras in which he's adapted to his skill set, his abilities. He's adapted to that, and he gave us beautiful output. So what are your thoughts about Luka Modrić leaving?
Yeah, I won't just say that he is the best midfielder in our history. I think he's definitely up there in terms of football history as well. I think what he contributed outside of Madrid as well, along with inside this club, it should never be forgotten. A small country like Croatia, he took them to a World Cup final. Of course, he had a good supporting cast, but he was the main guy. And of course, being at Madrid, he was so consistent. I cannot find a best season for him, because he is that consistent. That most of the seasons, maybe gradually got better due to more quality and experience, etc. But every year, I would like to say that he has remained consistent, and for that, that's honestly one of the most difficult things to replace. There are some times when there are moments of quality, but consistency over a long period of time is something that's difficult to build. So it's a bit disappointing to see him leave. We know it had to come at some point in time. We knew that, but I think the difficult one is knowing that he's not going to be directly replaced. It's difficult to do so. It might take 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 5 years to find a player that can maybe do some of the things that he does, or similar players who can at least do half of the things that not just him, but that both Luka and Toni Kroos did. This year, from the emotional point of view, we lost Lucas and Luka. Last year it was Toni, and every year it seems like a player is leaving, which is part of football. Since La Decima, only Carvajal is there. I think also since the tribute as well, only Carvajal is there. And that just to show his longevity at this club, and in terms of the quality that he contributes to football, that even at 39 years of age, not just Ancelotti, but also Xabi Alonso counted on him off the bench, to contribute something positive.
Yeah, and let's talk about his decorated career as well, because he came in from Tottenham a long time ago, 2012, and he hadn't won a single trophy for Tottenham. He'd won some trophies for Dinamo Zagreb back in Croatia, but he wasn't exactly someone who's really decorated as a footballer. He comes in, and it's the most cliche thing. Everyone talks about it, but he was voted as the worst signing of the year in 2012-13. Then he just became this wonderful footballer, and we kind of knew that. At Tottenham he was a fantastic footballer. You could see the ability of his ability, but he really blossomed into something just world class over the next few years. And let me read off his accomplishments at Real Madrid: 5-time Spanish Super Cup winner, 2-time Spanish Copa del Rey winner, 5-time Club World Cup winner, 5-time UEFA Super Cup winner, 1-time Intercontinental Cup winner, 4 La Liga champions, 6 times Champions League winner. Like let me go through that again. 6 Champions Leagues. You know that is insane. And you know anyone who says it isn't is crazy. That is genuinely like you count each one on your hand and you say, you know, there'll be so many footballers that can't even sniff 1 Champions League, and then Luka Modric has 6. That's insane. Now and then the 1-time best player of Europe, and then 1 FIFA Men's the Best award, and then finally, probably the greatest achievement of Luka Modric is his Ballon d'Or. I mean, you know, I don't think we recognise that enough. You know, a lot of people have their opinions on whether Luka Modric actually deserved that Ballon d'Or, but at the end of the day, you know, he is the one who broke the Messi and Ronaldo streak of Ballon d'Ors. Before that, it had been 10 years since Kaká won it, and 10 years of consistent dominance between Ronaldo and Messi, and he was the one who broke it. That is insane, and I think we don't recognise that enough. I think he was just ridiculously good that year in 2018, especially in the Champions League. He was probably one of Real Madrid's best players, second behind Cristiano Ronaldo, as well as, you know, the World Cup, like you mentioned, with Croatia. I mean, you know, you mentioned how Croatia had a good supporting cast, but still, it's like Croatia is like a small nation. I mean, is Croatia's got 2 million people or something like that? It's something crazy. And you know, there's so many other nations in the world who have similar levels but could never ever sniff a World Cup final. And if you gave them a player like Luka Modric, it's just like, it's a blessing. It's a blessing for a country like Croatia, because you know that he has the ability to drag them to a World Cup final. So it's genuinely fantastic from him. But I think that the things that for me is the most impressive from Luka Modric is the fact that throughout his longevity, he's managed to adapt as a football player. Early on in his career, he was used as a workhorse at Real Madrid. Early on in his Real Madrid career, he was a guy who would cover so much ground. You know, he would be the guy who would cover the most ground on the pitch, and he'd run and make sure he'd get every inch of the pitch and make sure that, you know, there was like, he was a ground eater as well as just a fantastic player on the ball. And then you get later on in that 3-pit era, and he was more of a maestro. He'd get on the ball and he would dictate the play. And I think the thing that, you know, most resonated was that 16-17 final against Juve, where he got 2 assists, and he was just like, you know, Juve couldn't handle it. He was genuinely just magnificent. That was one of the best performances I've seen by a midfielder in my lifetime. I think he was just absolutely magnificent in that game. And then later on in his career, I remember in 18-19 when we lost Ajax and Frenkie de Jong dropped him, and we all thought that was the moment in which Luka Modric was finished. No, he wasn't. He had a good 5 more years left in him, and he redeveloped himself as just a guy on the ball. He still do quite a lot of running, but obviously he had other guys around him to do the legs for him. Fede, Camavinga, and now obviously we've got Jude and Tchouaméni. He would obviously be the guy to dictate the play and make sure that, you know, we wouldn't lose the ball. He'd bring calm in a sense of, you know, in a storm for Real Madrid. I think he was just fantastic over these last few years under Carlo Ancelotti. And Ancelotti, fair enough to him. I mean, he's managed to get great output out of a really old Luka Modric. And to Luka Modric, I mean, he's maximised every ounce of ability he's got. He's going to AC Milan now as well, and I hope he does really well at AC Milan, because, you know, he can definitely help them. But I mean, it just shows you his adaptability as a footballer. The fact that he's had basically 3 different eras at this club. I think it just is testament to his longevity, and hopefully, long may it continue. Hopefully, he can continue as a great footballer for a couple more years, maybe at AC Milan. But even if he doesn't, the legacy is just fantastic, and, you know, the eras in which he's provided for Real Madrid are just fantastic. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, times we thought he was finished. So many times he had to adapt to, you know, be an important player. Not just after 18-19, even after the 2021 season, I believe, when we got knocked out by Chelsea. And the main thing was that Chelsea, they beat us with their intensity. The midfield three couldn't play together. Even the next season they played together and they won the Champions League. You know, so the season after that, he was still important, and that was like his last season as a starter. And then he eventually became a player who was come off the bench and still dictate the game. He didn't complain publicly. I'm sure deep down he was upset because it was not something he was accustomed to. But it was something that had to happen. I think Luka had to take a step back for the team to evolve a bit. But I believe that he still evolved with the team, and his new squad position, his squad player position. I think it was good enough, for him to contribute enough and for him to be respected enough, to contribute in his later stages. That's excellent for me. And even at 38, he would come off the bench and score winners for this team. Like the goal against Sevilla, the goal against Girona last year. I believe that's something that you cannot really count out. For a player to do so at that age, and adapt, even though many thought that he was finished at some point in time. Even I remember when Chelsea beat us, we had a podcast and I said, you know, at some point in time we have to move on from the midfield three, and I would take Mason Mount over him. That was maybe the worst statement that I've ever made. And looking back at it now, I think Mason Mount is finished even before Luka Modrić. I won't say he's finished, but he's dropped off before him. And so many players, so many young players, are just an example to show that so many young players who came after him are speeded away even, and they are way younger than him, like Ase, Ila, Mendy, Kovacic. In my opinion, imagine that Kovacic, I'm not too sure how much, but maybe 8, 7 years younger than Modric, and Modric is at a higher level than him. So many players came to Madrid and they just couldn't take his position. So many young, talented players, they just couldn't take his position. Even Camavinga came, and it took him a while before he eventually was able to play more minutes and Luka. It took him a while because even though he was younger, Modric was still contributing more and was still more important to the team. And you can argue that yes, he can still contribute, but at some point in time, you just have to accept that he had to say goodbye to the club. And of course, it just happened to be this year. We knew it was coming, but we really hoped that he could have retired at the club due to what he represented, But it's football, and of course, we have to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he could have given one more year because I think he still had that ability to come off the bench. But if he feels it's right to move on at this point, and he can still start for AC Milan, which is the crazy thing. He is still a starting level player for a team like AC Milan. So I think at least he can go somewhere and still start and in Serie A, I think he can definitely cause some issues for the other teams in Serie A. To be totally honest, I think he can be a top quality player in that league, which is definitely a lot slower, and we can see guys like Scott McTominay thrive. So I think he can definitely help AC Milan quite a lot, and that's good for him, at least. But I would have hoped to have him for one more year. But I think we've got to talk about what's your favourite Luka Modrić moment?
Oh, it's difficult to find even a best Luka Modric season.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even more difficult to find a Modric moment. But for me, I'd always go back to the Manchester United game in his first season when he scored that goal to equalise. I believe that's because that's when he is now starting to be an important player. He was voted the worst signing just a couple of months before. The worst signing over the last 6 months in his first season. And then to come back from that, and I think in the second half of that year was when he really started to kick off. And I think that goal against Manchester United, it was similar to the goal he scored against Argentina in the 2018 World Cup. I'm not too sure if you remember.
Yeah.
the Manchester United goal. But I think that's when we say, you know what, this guy, he can start. You know, he's not going to be the number 10 to take Ozil's place. You know, but he can play deep. He can replace Alonso and Khedira. Or he can maybe start with one of them. You know, because he's that good. He can shoot, he can pass, he can dribble, he can dictate the game. I think for me that was a big moment for me. And of course, the La Decima corner, I think we more associate that with Sergio Ramos than him. You know, only you would mention, yeah, Modrić took the corner, but in the moment you would say, okay, that's a Sergio Ramos moment. You know, so, but looking back at it now, you know, without him, you can say that's a moment that he contributed to. So yeah, that's one. But for me, the Manchester United goal, and even the assists against Juventus, like you mentioned, that's still he caused that. He contributed to that. But I think it's a Cristiano moment. But like I said, he was just so consistent. That's difficult to pick one. But for me, another one was in the 2016-17 game, in the last game at the Vicente Calderon. You know, when we were down to 0, Atletico Madrid had us. They had us. They cut the tie from 3 goals to 1 goal because they were beating us 2-0 after we won 3-0 in the first leg. And everyone was struggling. But I think with Luka and Tony, they dictated the game, and they just like took control of the game until Isco scored. And that's when we know, we're going through. But before that, we needed answers, and he was an answer. In difficult times, he always stepped up. So I think that's something that's really difficult to lose. I think the passion he has is excellent. Of course, the assist against Chelsea. That is a Luka Modric moment for me. Even the Rodrigo scored, that was an excellent Luka Modric moment. If I have to say one more, I would say it's the goodbye, the last game. It's good to see him get a tribute like that. He deserved it. Um, I think that is difficult to explain. What he meant to Madrid. You know, because I just think we were so numb to how good he was that it's going to take years. Like similar to Tony Kroos, we didn't really understand how good he was until how much we struggled, or when we knew that his time was coming to an end. That's when we appreciate players more. I think that's a bit. That's just life, you don't appreciate things until you can no longer have access to it. I think there's so many moments, every time he did something special, any bit of magic, it would feel special for me. But those moments were really good. Like you said, he was doubted at the start. He was signing on to just be so good even now, and remembered so positively. No one would ever say that 6 months after the signing. So I think every season is special, every moment was special, but those moments for me was really nice. I'm sure there are more, and we can talk about it at a later time because there's so many moments it's difficult to remember. But I'm sure that when you give me your moments, I will remember them as well. So how about you?
Yeah, I think what you said was with the Ramos header and then the Ronaldo final as well. I think that sums up Luka Modric perfectly because of the fact that he was the one often pulling the strings for the other guys to have their big moments. We remember that final, both of those finals, as the Sergio Ramos header and then the Ronaldo, when Ronaldo just took over noodle hair Ronaldo, right? And we remember that, but we don't remember the Luka Modric moments that made those things happen. The one I was going to say was obviously the Chelsea one, because for me, it might be a bit of recency bias, but for me that was the greatest run I've seen from a single team in Champions League history. And the pure fact of the matter is, the momentum was complete. I remember that game, and I was shitting myself in that game because we were absolutely out of it. Chelsea were all over us, and there was nothing we could do. Tuchel had them pinned down and exactly where he wanted them. And it needed some magic, some kind of stupid pass, something that 9 times out of 10 wouldn't go right, but it needed something like that for us to actually go ahead and swing the momentum back. And Luka Modric provided that moment, and I think that was just, we're gonna replay that moment for the rest of our lives, in my opinion, because that is the one which I feel like that was the last great Luka Modric moment, in my opinion. The last one in which we were like, damn, that is the best midfielder in the world, in my opinion. And so, for me, that is, I'm not gonna say that's far and away the best moment for me, but I think that's clearly the most memorable. It was just like that moment for me was just what summed up Luka Modric's career, and everyone was all over him at that moment in time, and rightfully so. He was just an excellent moment. I mean, just going back through the years, I mean, you brought up some excellent one. The one against Man United, that's an excellent pull, in my opinion. And I think the World Cup as well, I think we've got to talk about that one as well, because you mentioned the goal against Argentina. That was a goal in which I felt like, damn, Croatia are actually really damn good, and they just beat up Messi's Argentina pretty easily. So I think that's definitely one. I mean, I want to pull up his performance against England as well in the semi-final. There wasn't a specific moment, but I just think the performance he put together against England was really damn good. I remember the whole nation, when we were back in 2018, we were so excited for that semi-final. And when Trippier scored that free kick, and then suddenly, you could just feel the air going out as soon as, Modric started getting on the ball, and then Croatia eventually scored their goal, and then they scored the winner, and then suddenly all the air came out of England, and it just fell apart. Everything just fell apart in that semi-final. But Modric was behind that. He was behind all of that, and it just shows you all of that good stuff that Modric provided. I think for me those are and I think the one thing that we love to talk about the 14-15. I want to talk about the 14-15 one as a what if season, because of the fact that we came so close in every single tournament, and I think all of it came down to the fact that Modric got injured in that season. And if Modric had stayed healthy, then we could have been potentially talking about a treble in that season, because we were right down to the wire. And then Modric got injured against Malaga, and suddenly everything fell apart right at the end. We lost against Juve. We fell apart in La Liga, and we couldn't go all the way in. Obviously, we fell apart. I think was that the season which we got disqualified? No, that was the next season. But we lost in the Copa del Rey, and so everything fell apart in that season. And so a lot of it comes down to the fact that Modric wasn't there, unfortunately, and luckily we made up for it in the seasons following. But for me, those you got all of the perfect moments, in my opinion. But I really had to highlight the one against Chelsea, because I think that was my favourite by far and away.
Yeah, of course. Let's not forget the PSG game as well at the Bernabeu as well. The tackle of Messi, the assist for Benzema. But there's so many more that's coming back to me. But I think we highlighted the main ones, which is good. But he was always consistent. I think that's special. Even every time he dropped the shoulder, and just got past someone to just evade pressure. I think that's special for me, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the future now, because obviously Luka Modric leaves, big void to fill at Real Madrid. Are you happy with the depth at Real Madrid at this current moment in time in terms of midfield? Because right now we've got, in my opinion, 6 definite midfielders. We've got Jude, who's out until October or November, I can't remember which one it was. We've got Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Fede, Arda, and Dani Ceballos. That's our depth chart. That's what it's looking like at this current moment in time. Are you happy with that level of depth, or do you think we need something else?
If I'm being honest, I believe that the squad is good enough to win La Liga. That's one. It's good enough to win 2 of the trophies that you're competing for, whether it's La Liga, Super Cup, La Liga, Copa. The Champions League, maybe it might take an extra year, but it's still good enough to win the Champions League. But for but I know we can always say no one's for the Champions League. We have a 10% chance for the teams. It's going to be difficult because the Champions League is always difficult. So you can't be overconfident, but we know we can always do well. But in terms of the league, I believe we're good enough to win the league. But what's concerning for me is that yes, we have options, but I think that we will have a season where we are going to be too dependent on some players. For example, I think Ada is going to have an important year, and why he's going to have an important year because both Luka and Tony um, is no longer here. We need someone who can pass the ball. And I think if you lose a player like that, who's just so important, to your build-up, to your progression, to your circulation, I think it's going to be difficult. The reports shows that Xabi Alonso maybe isn't too fond of Ceballos. Maybe he likes him, but maybe not as a main player. So that gives us less options. So I believe we have enough numbers to win. But I still think we might need one more. But I think the club is right in terms of what the midfielder that you're going to get for a bargain. Unless, like, for example, a Gula type opportunity comes up for like under 25 million, I think we're going to go after them. But other than that, I think the answer will be no. But I'm content. I think we have good enough squad to win. And I still believe that we need maybe like some extra numbers because, like I said, Luka Modrić could have still contributed off the bench, but just for us to have the additional options, for us not to overspend on the player or like if we are lacking squad depth due to injuries and the amount of games. But I think I'm happy with the options that we have. I'm happy with the fact that Adegula will have he has new options in the team now because he's playing a lot deeper. But I still think that maybe we need at least one more. But for now, I'm content. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, 100%. I think, listen, there's a lot of excuses we can make for Real Madrid. The front two are not delivering at this moment in time, and they're really pissing me off at this moment in time. But the squad in itself shouldn't be a limiting factor. We should be able to win at least La Liga. You don't have to. Here's the thing I always say. You don't have to beat Barcelona 38 games to win La Liga. You only play Barcelona twice. The other 36 games you can definitely win, no doubt. So the pure fact of the matter is this squad is definitely good enough to win La Liga. The thing is that when it comes to the Champions League, I'm still, Vinicius and Mbappe are really annoying me at this current moment in time because both of them are just not doing their job properly. On both ends of the pitch, to be totally honest, especially on Vinicius' end, his attacking contribution is just absolutely null at this point. And then on Mbappe's side, I don't know what he's doing, but I don't know why he can just watch Dembele running, and then he does absolutely nothing. So, that's something, right? But in terms of the squad, the midfield depth, it can be a bit of a problem, especially last season when we had so many guys injured. And so, it can be a difficult issue, but for me, I think if worst comes to worst, you got Trent now as well. If you need to play him in the midfield, and hopefully Xabi Alonso maybe even trust someone like Gemma from Castilla. That's the worst comes to worst. I think he'll be okay once Camavinga comes back from injury. He's going to be coming back soon. Once he comes back, obviously Jude's going to be missing the first few months of the season. That's a bit annoying, but you can deal with it. You can definitely deal with it. So, there are solutions. There are. I think this squad is definitely good enough to win La Liga, and like you said, no excuses in my opinion. So, I think it's this.
Let me ask you a question quickly. I think the disappointment part of the midfield is that I think with Gonzalo Garcia, we knew that he's a striker. He's got this amount of goals. We knew that we want him to have a shot on the Tuesday. I don't think much people are campaigning for like Chima to have this. If I'm being honest, I'm not too sure good he is, but I'm not like seeing like the hype that he deserves. Yes, he deserves a shot on the Tuesday. I think the midfield at Castilla has been like a problem for years. We have never really been developed by any top player who could go on and contribute, if I'm being honest. So I think maybe that could be a bit of an issue, but other than that, like you said, we're fine.
I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, I don't see anything special in Chema, but the way I see it is, the fact is that someone like Raul Asensio, who wasn't even the starting centre for Castilla, or was, but he wasn't exceptional. He was pretty average, nothing special. Was behind Jacobo Ramon and Joao Martinez in the standings for the first team, and yet he still provided great value last season. So I just see the fact that it is like Gemma he's got really good attributes. I see him. He's tall, he's strong, he's definitely rigid. He can provide something. I can see that, and so if Raul Asensio can provide something, think how many other guys can also provide at least something. Victor Munoz came out of nowhere last season, and I thought he was quite good towards the end of the season. Unfortunately, he's left us now, so good luck to him at Osasuna. But someone like Chema, who isn't exceptional by far, but he can definitely provide something. Like there's especially as a 7th choice or 8th choice midfielder, I don't mind having Chema, and I don't think there's any problems with having Chema as another option.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I'm not talking about like in general as well. But yeah, I get what you're saying. But you have a really fair point in terms of the offensive situation, and of course with the numbers that we have. I think that the fact that we have a more tactical coach that can be a bit more flexible with his tactics as well can help us a bit. We have good options, and I believe that Dean and Shirt, in my opinion, their signing will be key as well in helping us survive another year without a stable midfield to an extent, But hopefully, like I said, I'm not going to say let's sign a player right now because you're not too sure who we're going to get. I mean, you cannot just replace Luka Modrić and Toni Kroos like we always say. There is no direct replacement. I just think that the team just has to be a bit more flexible, and other players just have to step up. It's simple as that. So that's why I'm saying, you can find internal solutions and find ways to make the team play. That's not to say that you're not going to sign someone if you have the opportunity to. Like, for example, if the team is available, then yes, but we know he's not, so then we have to find other solutions, So I think that's the situation. We just need players to step up, and we need a coach to find solutions. I think that's something that Ancelotti did to an extent, but last year he didn't do as much as he should have. He should have found solutions. He should have benched one of the front three a bit sooner. He should have done a lot of things quicker, but I think he waited a bit too long. And of course, not just Ancelotti. I think the last season was a holistic failure from the board, the management, and the players. Are you telling me that the board couldn't have invested in like short-term solutions for him, similar to like the Joselu operation? He could have invested in a short-term fullback at least. If it failed, but it's a short-term option. The club is not going to be in debt for signing Kyle Walker on a 6-month loan. I'm not saying it has to be Kyle Walker. I'm just giving an example. Or for example, Ancelotti took him. He had this. Lucas Vázquez started all the Clásicos, I believe. So that's funny to me because at least the first two, like Ancelotti saw Lucas got destroyed in the first one, and we went ahead and made the same mistake again in the second one. So I think like they placed Lucas in a difficult position. We wanted him to get dropped because he just wasn't capable of being a starter time after time again. He just placed in a position to be the club's scapegoat. So that's one. I think actually it took too long to bench him, and he just didn't find solutions, or he just wasn't bold enough to make some decisions which he should have done. And then finally the players, I just think that it was shameful that some of them didn't work hard enough. They're playing for Madrid. I cannot that he doesn't have to force you or asks you every game to put in effort on the defensive side. So I think that for me will explain that it was a failure on all three ends. So I think Xabi Alonso is going to fix that. The board has done good enough to get players champion. They have now gotten a new coach. He is more flexible, I hope. He shows signs of it. Hopefully he plays the players that are put in effort. And I think he will, because the report was that Vinicius was the one who was going to be benched and Trent got injured. But let's see how it goes. Let's see how the first 3 months goes, and then we can make an assessment from there.
Yeah, and I think everything lies on Xabi Alonso at this point. We'll have to see how he deals with the issues of the squad. There's many issues, but let's see how he deals with them. But I think that's all we've got to add today. I want to thank Luka Modrić, because he is genuinely one of the greatest players who have played for Real Madrid, and we both got to see him in his prime, and so we're both very grateful for that. Good luck to him at AC Milan. And yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye. Thank you.